Hey everyone, welcome to another video. If you're new here, my name is Irit. I'm a watercolor and mixed media artist based in Austria in Europe. And on my channel, I share my passion for watercolor and mixed media. I talk about watercolor and mixed media, and I also paint. If you want to see more painting and less talking, you can check out last week's video or one of the dozens and dozens of painting videos. And one of my goals on my channel is to help you avoid the many mistakes that I made when it comes to purchasing certain products or just the way you learn to paint. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so that I know what you like to see. It really helps. I would also love to read your comments. Let me know what you think is one of the biggest mistakes beginners make. And this video is by no means judgmental, or I am not trying to preach anything. I just want to shine a light on these mistakes, let's say, that I made countless of times, and I still make sometimes, but I think if you are more aware of it, that's already a good step forward. The number one mistake that beginners make is focusing on the supplies, especially paint. And I want to divide this into two sections. So I have many videos with recommendations on which palettes to start with, which paint to start with. I also have a two-part series kind of reviewing most of the well-known brands and kind of highlighting what are their strengths and weaknesses, in my opinion, of course. And so that can be very helpful in kind of navigating your way through this very overwhelming range of paint available. But many people have a really nice selection of watercolors, and instead of just spending their time painting and using what they have and expanding your collection in a more intentional and smarter way, keep trying kind of the same basic sets for many different brands. And this will also kind of connect to the second mistake that I will talk about, which is just kind of falling down to that rabbit hole of watching hauls and collecting art supplies. Now, if you're happy with it, if you don't have any budget issues, if you want to try everything and have everything, I totally get that. I'm not judging you, but I don't think it's necessary, and personally there are quite a few sets I wish I hadn't bought. I'm on YouTube, so part of my job is to review products. Those are the most popular videos, and I completely understand. Also, before I buy anything, I want to see what other people think about it. But if if you're not on YouTube, if you're just playing for your own fun, and you have a nice set of artist grade paint, I would use my money elsewhere. So that is one thing. And I'm not saying that, you shouldn't watch any hauls or anything like that. However, if you have a few channels and a few artists that you enjoy the way that they paint and you enjoy just how they deliver their message, maybe try and look for those favorite videos and see what they actually use, because hauls just show what people buy. It doesn't actually show you what they love and what they use. So the videos where they are actually painting, or yearly favorites, monthly favorites, even like gift guides, can give you a much better idea of what the artists you like actually use in their artwork and not just what they buy. So I really recommend that. And the more you kind of teach YouTube what you want to see, the more suggestions you'll get that really that suit you better. Hauls are really fun, really lovely, but I don't know if they're like the best way to actually find really great products that you need and you don't already have. Now, on the other side of that, I would say that there's a lot of focus on watercolor paint, and I understand that because, you know, playing with all the colors, buying all the colors, opening all those little pans and swatching everything, that's very exciting. I love that too. But brushes and paper also play a huge role in your development, in your learning, and that topic is just less appealing, I guess. I have a couple of videos on brushes and they are never as popular as the ones about paint. And I really think if you find the brushes that work for you, and there are a lot of techniques that you simply cannot do with, you know, one type of brush. And so exploring different types of brushes and different types of paper might bring you much further in your learning journey than just, you know, buying another set of artist grade paint that you already have just from a different brand. So I would be mindful of that, and I would also keep my eyes open for, you know, recommendations on brushes that can serve you in certain ways or can help with certain techniques. Things like, you know, grass or skies or clouds. There are a lot of specific brushes that can make creating a certain look much, much easier. And so keep your eye out for those and try at least, maybe let's just say, spread the focus equally on brushes, paper, and paint, and not just focus on the paint. So moving on to mistake number 2, which I think if you're watching this video, that means, you know, you are on YouTube, and that means you're probably also guilty. I don't want to use the word guilty, but you find yourself doing this, and that is watching more than participating, doing something passive more than doing something active. And I mentioned this in a previous video, and a lot of you agreed with this. And I also completely understand that, you know, first of all, when you're lying in bed, obviously, you know, you're about to fall asleep. Obviously, this is not a time you could be painting. But if there is a time that you could be painting, then watch a tutorial and paint along. Or watch a haul you wanted to watch and paint along. But the point is, you have to paint. If you want to learn, if you want to develop, if you want to become better and kind of find your way, find your voice, paint, enjoy, you have to paint. There is no way around it. You can watch all the artists, you can watch all the lessons, you can watch all the tutorials. If you don't actually paint, you're not going to develop and become better. It just doesn't work. I mean, in a way, it's the same like watching someone exercise. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could get in shape by watching someone else exercise? But you can't. And so at least be mindful of that, and at least, you know, catch yourself when you have the possibility to paint and you're watching something on YouTube. And it doesn't have to be if you want to watch a tutorial, but you might not be in the mood to actually try what they're doing in that tutorial. You can paint something else, but just do something active. Don't just sit and watch, because it'll just take you, you're just lengthening your learning journey, and it's just a shame. The more you paint, the better you'll be, the more you'll advance, and the more you'll also learn what you like and what you don't like. More on that later. Mistake number 3 that a lot of us make, and that is probably one of the biggest challenges of actually painting with watercolor, is to really kind of master the ratio of water and pigment, or water and watercolor paint, and knowing when to use each consistency. There is a whole science about this, about the consistency of your paint, if it's like tea, if it's like milk, whatever you want to call it. There is obviously a range from very watered down paint to very concentrated paint, and the most intense paint you can get is with just straight out of the tube paint. And it's really important to understand how to use those different consistencies. This is not true to every style of painting, but for a lot of techniques, usually, and I say usually, it's not true for everyone, and it might not be the way that you like to work, but if you're aware of that, then that's fine. But usually we start with a more watered down version, and then gradually, as we're building layers, the paint should be more and more concentrated. The reason for this is with watercolors, we don't have the kind of freedom to endlessly layer like we have with acrylics. And at some point, even if you can add more and more, at some point you lose the light and your painting becomes dull, flat, and overworked. With watercolors, many times less is more, and the more intentional and the more skilled you are with the way that you use them, the better the results are, especially when you're painting in a more expressive, loose way. And so you really have to pay attention to that and not to start too heavy-handed, because that really won't allow you to build layers and add detail and depth and those different values, the lighter values and the darker values, which make a painting interesting. Because you'll already at the beginning, if you go in heavy-handed, you have already after like the first or second layer, a page full of kind of medium values. It can be very hard to build on that. So really pay attention as you're painting to the consistency of your paint. And if you want to play with watery loose washes, I'm not talking about the glazes. Glaze is a different thing. But if you want to play with puddles of paint and a lot of water, it usually comes at the beginning of the process. If you do this later on, you might disturb the layers underneath. It depends on the paper, and you might just create a muddy mess. As you progress, as you build your layers, you can use, or you should use most of the time, more and more concentrated paint, and use it more intentionally and use it in certain areas of your paintings. Those are the lessons that I have learned myself, and I've learned from other artists who paint in a similar way to how I paint. So keep an eye on your brush, on your paint consistency, and keep that in mind. You know, start with the more water, and then when you're doing the final stages, that's really when you kind of want to avoid watery paint, and that's when you want to use more concentrated paint in a more limited and intentional way. Number 4 is a big one. Everyone talks about this, and I have to say it's kind of true. Number 4 is value. So value is just the lightness of your paint, if you want to call it. It's not necessarily connected to color. It's connected to how dark or light the color is. And you actually might be surprised at some colors that you think are very bright and are not too dark, but when you actually translate them to like a gray scale, you see that they are actually much darker than you expected. I have that with, you know, the very like bright intense pinks. I kind of see them as the medium light values, but they actually carry a bigger punch, and if used too heavily can be just too dark for a painting, or it's going to be hard for me to compete with the darker shadows and kind of bring out those contrast, you know, highlights and darker values. There's a lot of literature and tutorials about value. I would give you just a quick tip. What I have found to be very helpful is when I'm kind of in the middle of my painting, I kind of put most of the things I want to put, most of the real estate that I want to, you know, contain actual paint. I love to leave white space also in my paintings, as you can see here. Once you get to that point and you're kind of not sure where to go from here, take a picture of your painting and edit it in any photo editing software. You can even do this on Instagram with their filters. You don't have to actually post the picture, and turn it into grayscale or black and white. And this will immediately show you where you are when it comes to value. Most of the work that I've done myself that it just wasn't working in a way, you know, I was just in the middle of the painting and like, what do I need here? Or work that I've seen from my students that also kind of lacked something, it's usually value. It's usually value. It's usually either, you know, you have to add some darker values, you have to add some lighter values, or both, usually both. And just seeing your painting in grayscale really, really highlights that. So this can give you a painting that only has medium values, that doesn't have darker values, that doesn't have lighter values, is usually flat and boring. And it's not so hard to enhance it by, you know, taking advantage of those wonderful values on both sides of the scale. So with watercolors, the highlights might be a bit more problematic. This is a great place to use something like white gouache, or mix a little bit of white gouache with another paint, or use pastels, which I love to use, or even very opaque watercolor can be worked. And then with the darker values, you should always have in your color story a color that is darker. It's very hard to paint a successful painting without that. So as you can see, actually, I just see it above my shoulder. I was talking about the about values. You can see how this hot pink, I mean, it's like a hot pink, but it's pretty dark compared to everything else on that painting. So again, switching your photo of your paintings to black and white can really highlight where you are value-wise. And I highly, highly recommend checking your paintings regularly to see where you stand with values. And not forget to include in your color palette, in your color story, in every painting, at least one color that is darker. Okay, number 5 is, I would say, probably, I don't know, I think for some people this will be really easy, and for some people it will be really, really difficult. I probably fall more on that side of the spectrum because I always value the experience of others who have been doing this for much longer than I have and much more successfully. But number 5 is listen to your inner voice. And by that, I don't mean that you shouldn't, you know, learn from anyone. You absolutely have to. I don't think if you just close yourself in a room with paint, maybe wonderful things will happen, but I'm sure that there are a lot of techniques and things that it will take you much, much longer to discover when others have already discovered it for you. So I don't think that you shouldn't learn from anyone, but I think it's really great and essential when right from the get-go you kind of make mental notes and pay attention to what you like and what you don't like about the things that you're learning. And the faster you kind of implement your own preferences into your painting, the faster you'll get to creating something that is more authentic and more individual and more you. And that can be the smallest thing. So for example, if you want to paint landscapes and you are learning how to paint skies, and you're learning all these techniques that you can do clouds and whatever, and you like the technique, but you just don't like the colors that your instructor is using, you can change them. Unless you want to exactly capture a certain color of the sky on a particular day, you can use whatever you like. And I really believe that the more personal your choices get, and the more emotionally you are involved with everything that's going on in your painting, whether it's the colors you use or the thing that you're painting, the more fun you will have, the more emotionally engaged you will be, and the faster you'll get to that place where you're not just copying other people's paintings, or just like painting things that you don't really feel any attachment to, or that when you're done painting them you think, okay, you know, I did all the techniques right, it looks good, but it doesn't say anything to me, it doesn't sing. you know, it's just a painting. It might be technically good, but I don't feel any emotional response to it. And I don't want that for you, because I think it's much, much more fun and enjoyable to be involved with everything that you're doing and make it about you and make it personal. And yes, there are rules, there are things that, you know, work most times. There are principles when it comes to technique, when it comes to composition, when it comes to aesthetics, when it comes to all these things. Listen, learn, but at some point also understand what really speaks to you, where you are in all of this. And I say this all the time. Remember that something that works for another artist or another 100 artists won't necessarily work for you, or it might just be something you don't want to do this because you don't enjoy it. So for me, that can be using reference photos, or having a very detailed sketch before I start, or having no sketch. I also did that for a long time, and honestly, it didn't really work for me. I created paintings that were much less focused, much less planned, and I usually lost interest somewhere along the way because I wasn't really engaged and involved in all the decisions along the way. So, of course, when you're starting, you have to learn from others, but I don't want you to kind of feel bad about not agreeing or not enjoying or not wanting to do the same things as artists you really admire and love do. It's totally okay. There are no rules in art, and you should be doing what speaks to you. And you know, it's even, I've had students in my intuitive painting course that really blossomed when they found the kind of courage to paint things that you don't really see someone else painting. And for them, it was something important, and they wanted to paint it, and they kind of never really felt free enough to do that, or brave enough to do that, because, you know, you should be painting florals or architecture or something, whatever. So you should do what is good for you. I just want to do a little bit of house cleaning, and I will be sending out in the next days a newsletter about new content I'm adding to my very first class that I think came out 4 years ago, Watercolor Workbook. This is my most beginner-friendly class. It's a great class to take with your kids. Very relaxing, very enjoyable, no previous skills necessary. All you need is paint, brush, paper. That's it. And I will be adding more content to that is a little bit similar to what I've been doing recently, some lessons that I've learned. We're going to make our own logbook, reference book, whatever you want to call it, and it's really fun. I haven't raised the price on that class since it came out, and I'm not going to raise it. It's a very affordable class. I want everyone to be able to take it. However, if you have taken my other courses, I will be sending out a discount code for you, just as a thank you. And yes, I don't want to create an entirely new class. I want to add to that one. Everyone that is already on that class can have access to all that content. And if that sounds like something you're interested in, then sign up for my newsletter and you'll get all the information straight to your email. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week with another video. Take care. Bye bye.